Hello and welcome back. This is Sherry with Heart and Soulful. I'm in the studio today with a talk about printing on fabric. I also want to talk a little bit about scanning fabric because that kind of maybe goes together. I cover this a lot in my videos whenever I use printed fabric, but just sort of an abbreviated tutorial. So I wanted to do a standalone today just so that it would be really easy to find this demo. So I've done printing on fabric with my old printer, which was an Epson, just a cheap one, like an XP something. I don't even remember the number. I've had it for many years. And I didn't know if it would work or not, but I used to do it on that and that worked fine. I currently have a new Epson ET, the EcoTank 8500, and I'm going to be doing a review of that, I think, soon. I did have some issues when I first got it, and they actually sent me a replacement that I haven't set up yet. So I don't have any complaints about it, except for something that I think was just wrong with the machine. So I'll cover that later. But all of these that I'm going to show you today, I printed out with my new printer, the one that's actually getting sent back. And it printed fine. So I'm going to go through how I do that. Now, I want to say I don't know what printer you have or if your printer will print fabric or not. And a disclaimer, you do it at your own risk. I don't have any responsibility for if your printer can't handle that or not. So you can do a test if you can maybe talk to someone else that has your same printer and has tried it to find out if it works first. But I really wasn't afraid, especially on my cheaper printer. When I did get the new printer, part of why I got it has a back feeder. My old printer, I actually put it into the paper tray down below, and that was fine. So if you have a rear feeder, that's where I do it just because it's easier, and I haven't had any issues so far. So how I do it, now there's lots of ways to do this. I know there's other videos out there. I've seen people maybe use adhesives and that sort of thing. But this is the way that I have found that I like to do it, and I find it really easy and pretty foolproof, and I don't worry about my printer when I do it this way. So I'm using, I'm going to be printing fabric from things that I have scanned and collaged. So I make these sometimes available in my Etsy shop. This is the kit I'm working on currently with some old books, and that will be available very soon. I like to print certain things onto fabric. Part of it is it just gives you a different effect. For book covers, I really like it because it's just an easier way to get it onto a book and have it feel like an old book. So anyway, let's get started. The first thing you're going to need is some sort of fabric that you're going to print onto. And so far, I've just been using, recycled fabric that I have. Cotton fabric is what I've been working with. This is just a white cotton. It's not very heavy. I've worked with some off-white cotton, old sheets, something like that might work. I don't know, polyester versus cotton or, a blend, I'm sure would be fine. So just some kind of fabric that's not too thick. If your printer will take, or heavier like cardstock, then you shouldn't have any problem because you're going to attach this to a piece of paper. So as long as it's not any thicker than what would be like a heavy cardstock that your printer can already take. When I do it, I actually just use my printer settings for plain white paper, and you can either do a standard setting or the book covers I have done on a high setting. If you find that you do something and you get some lines, horizontal lines, two things is you check your nozzles and maybe they're clogged. And if you don't get a perfect print pattern on your test, then you want to clean your nozzles. The other thing is that you sometimes will get those horizontal lines if you just aren't using a high enough, like if you're doing a standard print versus a higher quality print. I've done it both ways, and I actually don't. The standard setting's usually pretty good unless you get those lines. For certain things, like if I'm doing old photographs, I've actually printed old photos, and I don't mind, the quality of that being a little less because I want it to kind of look like an old photo. I'm going to find one here that I know I did. Where is she here? So this is actually an old photo printed on fabric. And again, that was just on a thin, probably a little bit thinner actually than this fabric that I'm showing you today. So any kind of, old sheet is a nice thinness that you can work with. And then you want to iron it. This one I haven't ironed yet. You can see it's all wrinkly. So just with a hot iron it as many wrinkles as you can get out of it. And then I use a full sticker sheet for mine. I like the amount of adhesive that it has on it, and I can actually stick this down, and then I take my iron. The fabric's usually still hot or warm, once I've ironed it. I just put my sticky back paper on right away, and then I can actually even iron it and flip it over to the fabric side. This is still attached to my sticky back paper, and iron it just to get any wrinkles out. You can use a credit card or something if you need to, but if you've ironed your fabric, it really comes out pretty well. So I have a piece somewhere. I have this stuck down to my sticky back, so I just remove the backing and stick that down, and you can see there's still maybe some little fine wrinkles in there, but not too bad at all. And that's going to work out fine. The next thing I like to do is just from the back side, flip it over. And normally when I stick this down, there's a little bit of fabric around it. And I'll just cut right along my paper edge as a guide and just cut that to the 8.5 by 11 size. Then the other thing I like to do, because I've been, doing this at my ironing board, is I'll take a lint roller and just go over this front just to make sure I don't have any little bits or anything left on any kind of lint, because I don't want that to stay in my printer. I also want to make sure that I don't have any little things like this that little threads that want to come off. So I want to make sure, I don't have anything that's going to get stuck. So I just want to make sure I trim off all of that, any little threads. Okay, so this one's good and ready to go into my printer. Now my back feeder, if my bottom tray, I would put it in face down with the fabric down, and it would feed through that way. My back tray, I actually feed it where my fabric is facing me. So I just plop it in there, do it on a plain white paper setting. Your printer might need a heavier paper setting if you see any issues. But honestly, mine, I have not had any trouble. I found that the quality of my printing, after some tests, that I just liked it using a plain white paper setting. Then it comes out, and I still have this one attached to my backing, and actually I kind of want to leave these attached just because I haven't done my video yet for my presentation of my new paper pack. But you're just going to peel that backing off, and sometimes you can use those sticky back depending on how much tack you have left. You would just peel that off after you print it. Now I've had this stuck to this one for a couple of days. I was just leaving, but normally I could take this off and there would still be enough tackiness. I could use this maybe a second time. If you're worried about it, I'll just use them once. So, you're spending the cost of that sticker paper, but to me, it's worth it to know that nothing's going to get caught in my printer because it's just stuck down really good. And I don't have to worry about spraying on any kind of spray adhesive or anything like that. This is just kind of a quick, clean, easy way to do it. So I printed out a couple of book covers. Now, I had done these from, like I said, from scans that I had done. This one I had shown in a previous on my rusted paper pack. And so this was actual rusted fabric that I scanned, and then I printed it out on plain fabric so that I still have my original fabrics, and that way I could share them with you and you could still print them on fabric. Now you could also flip this over once you'd printed one side and stick it down again and then print the other side, and you'd have reversible fabric. So you could do that. I would make sure that when you print your first print, before you flip it over, that you make sure your ink is really dry. If you've done this on a higher quality setting, plain white paper, but with a high quality, it takes a little bit longer to print it out. And when you do, you'll feel it will feel damp when it comes off the printer. So you need to let that ink dry. You can either let it dry naturally, or I kind of just go back and hit it with my iron again, you know, after it's dried a little bit, just to kind of do that final dry. You could also use your heat gun, just something so that when you touch it, it's not cold. You really feel like the ink has dried. I haven't tried doing it double-sided yet, so if you're concerned about it at all, you might wait 24 hours before you do the other side, just so you know your ink has cured. But I personally think that hitting it with an iron and heat setting it would be enough. Otherwise, what might happen is when you flip it over and stick it down to another piece of your sticker paper, some of your ink may come off onto your sticker paper, and it might be a little bit lighter. If you're doing a grungy thing, that might not matter to you, but I would just do a test, and I have not done that test. So this one is scanning fabric that was rusted and then printing it onto fabric. This one was scanning paper and then printing it onto fabric. This one was a scan of fabric, and this was a piece of French grain sack that was very textural, and so I printed it onto this. I'm going to be having another kit that will have different fabrics that I happen to have that I can share, so that you can print them out either on paper or fabric, whatever you want to do. So this one was just a piece of burlap, and I'm kind of wanted to show you this too, just because I had done it in another video, but not in a standalone video. To scan fabric, you know, if you have a piece of fabric and you put it into your printer on the glass to scan it, if you have any wrinkles or anything like that on it, which happens with burlap if it's been folded and you can't get them all ironed out, when you lay that down on your scanner, it might have some ripples and things like that in your actual scan. So the thing that I found that I like to do is I would take the piece of fabric and use the sticky back paper again and stick that to my fabric and iron it out. And that way all the wrinkles are evened out. And when you put that onto your scanner, this one is still attached to a piece. When I put that on my scanner, it's going to lay flat. I can even put a heavy book on it if I want. I do close down my scanner cover, but sometimes, you know, you'll have something that kind of just wants to curl up a little bit. So put a heavy book on that and then actually just leave it open and do your scan. For this one, my sticker paper is white, and I will put a link down below on the sticker paper that I use. It is a sticker paper that has a solid backing, and but it's white. So for most fabrics, that's fine. But when I'm doing burlap, or I also did some coffee sack, there's little holes and little gaps in between, and I didn't want that white to show through in my scan. So I have some craft vinyl sticky back that I use for that. And that way it's brown on the inside, and then you don't see that through. So I'll put a link below to the one that I use for that also. And that works with anything, you know, that's going to be brown that you see through. So that's how I scan fabric. I would not print onto burlap or coffee sack or the French grain sack, because those fabrics are just too thick, and they also have too many fibers that might come off in your printer. So if you want to have a print onto that type of texture, what I would do is scan the fabric so that you have a scan of it. And this is actually printed onto craft cardstock, a heavy craft cardstock, but that is my coffee sack. So what I could do, if it didn't have these numbers on it and I wanted some stencil on it, I could take that design and do it onto my paper one after the fact, or I could have that design scanned and then, you know, run this through the printer, and that would, so I've run it through the printer twice, I guess is what I'm saying. So if you know how to layer scans and things with an application on your computer, you can layer and do that. But if you don't have that technology or capability to do that, then you could print onto your paper the the fabric design that you want. So this is on paper, but then I don't have to worry about getting these little fibers in my printer. Then I could run this through a second time and print something else. So this one, for example, is a thick fabric that I don't want to run through my printer. So I scanned it and I've printed it on fabric, and I can stick this back onto my sticky back paper, and I could run it through again with another design on it, and it would be on this piece of fabric with this other heavier texture on it. I hope that was clear and makes sense. It's just a way to kind of manually add to, if you didn't want to stencil right on this piece, if you wanted to print it out. So those are just a couple of ideas from me that I've come up with by experimenting, of scanning fabric and then printing on fabric. So I hope that was clear. I hope that if you have any questions, then you can leave them down in the comments for me, and maybe it means I do another experiment and another video later, but this is what I've tried that works fine for me. So I hope you give it a try, and now have a great rest of your day. Now go make something. Bye.